Been here for how long?
8.5.
Yeah, 8.5.
So been here for a good while, it seems like. But
he knows the routine here.
Yeah,
he
yeah.
knows the routine.
Flow.
So good. So tonight's episode is going to be specifically on the EBU. So we'll get into, we'll get into the how it works and why it works so well. We'll talk about the oxidative stress part of it with the ozone hormesis. We'll get into that a little bit. If you're not familiar with that term, we'll define that for you. We'll get into that oxidative stress at a low level and what that does for the body, and how that creates an antioxidant effect and really a anti-inflammatory effect. But again, if you have too much oxidative stress,
it can put you spiral you into an oxidative event, which is not good for your body. So there's a balance there, and that's why we use a lower concentration with ozone, and when your blood is flowing through the dialyzer. We use a concentration of 7 gamma, which is a lot lower than some of these other practitioners that may use ozone. It also depends on how they're applying the blood to the gas, and that could differentiate as well. But we use a lower concentration for that specific reason. It's shown to have an anti-inflammatory effect in that range, and it's also not likely to create an oxidative crisis in the body. And so would be the last thing a lot of these cancer patients would want. And so we have some measurement tools that we use to make sure that that's not happening, with like a LEGO scan and things like that. And so
follow-up blood work.
Exactly. Also Teresa, she does the live cell blood analysis. She could tell whether we are creating some oxidative stress in the body, or if it's already happened, or who would be most suitable for doing EBU. From what I could tell.
You go through a checklist, which we'll talk about.
Okay.
But just piggybacking on this oxidative stress, right? So basically, if you have a lot of antioxidant or free radicals, it could be from inflammation, it could be from some of these things that are actually good for your body. So I think it's important to talk about that, because some things that are good for, this is the term hormesis, HORMESIS, right?
Yes.
It's important. It's a word that's being used a lot in the longevity world, right? But hormesis is, we could have high oxidative stress things, right? Could be exercise.
Right.
Could be heat, like sauna. Right. Could be cold, it could be fasting, it could be exercise, right? If we do too much. So there's a fine line between if we use these things that could be damaging, but use them in the right way, we get an anti-inflammatory, antioxidative effect from it, right? That's hormesis.
Yes, and we have been able to measure that. We've been able to look at that after Teresa has done the live cell after EBU, and she has seen if there's been red blood cells that have been broken up, or if there is oxidative damage happening, and she's reported with these lower concentrations that she's not seeing that. So that makes me feel good, being a practitioner doing it. I wouldn't want to, I took an oath to do no harm, I don't want to create any of that issue in anybody's body. So we've been able to see that through also some lab testing, and ozone in those low concentrations, that little bit, I think what you're talking about, where you're stimulating a little bit of oxidative stress in the body, initiates your liver to produce more glutathione. And so that glutathione is a major antioxidant, and so if that's going to spike a little bit, it could be good for us as well, being your mother antioxidant.
Well, the biggest thing, so if you look at the biochemistry, right, and this is, we're just jumping right in because I was a little late, so hey, let's go, right, and we're going to do some things. But one of the things that you learn is that if there's a little bit of oxidative stress by, say, low dose ozone, right, and we'll go through EBU, we'll go through the whole process, but if there's a little bit, it actually turns on these healthy pathways. It turns on pathways,
healing pathways.
Healing pathways that create things like antioxidants. It creates things like glutathione. It creates positive things. Where the opposite, if we're using too much, ozone, or getting too much exercise or too much heat or whatever it might be, it could turn on something called nuclear factor K beta or kappa beta. And what that does then is turn on COX-2, which is a major inflammatory. Turns on inflammatory cytokines. It turns on PGE2. All these inflammatory type of agents. So the point I'll make is, in this longevity world, right? And
Right.
Ibu falls right into there. If you've seen me on here before, you know I'm a huge fan of Ibu.
Yeah.
It's done so many wonderful things for me personally. So the point I'll make is, if you do too much, it could create inflammation. If you're using it properly, which the Ibu does with a low concentration of ozone, it actually stimulates these antioxidant, anti-inflammatory effect in the body.
It downregulates cytokines. It's also going to. We don't do it very frequent. You know, we can only do it once a week. The most frequent that I'd say we've done is within 5 to 6 days. I want to say I had a patient that did it on a Thursday and then a Monday, and you can tell if there's been some oxidative, stress going on.
Right.
If someone's been extremely fatigued, weeks on after doing Ibu, that is not the goal. That is not something that we're looking towards. It seems like most common symptom that I've gotten is you feel very relaxed and maybe sleepy afterwards.
Yeah.
And then I think that's where those healing pathways are being formed. And it's also modulating your immune system, waking up saying, hey, you got something going on. Why don't we get to work? And especially by downregulating those cytokines. So you're decreasing inflammation while kind of stimulating the immune system a little bit. So,
Right. And the effect that it had when I did it the first time, and again, if I don't want to bore you with my stories, but I'll tell you, the first time I did it, it was post-COVID. I was definitely not feeling well. I was getting to the gym, doing a set or two, and just totally wearing out, which indicates that at a cellular level, your mitochondria, which produce ATP or energy, is just not firing well.
Right.
And a lot of times what we learn now is those spike proteins were sitting around creating inflammation constantly. So I did the Ibu, and a couple hours after I did it the first time, I literally
some long hauler symptoms. Is that what it was?
Yeah. I crashed. Like I was physically fatigued. No, there's a difference between tired. Tired is just like, I need to take a nap.
Yeah.
I was fatigued to the point like I can't even lift my legs type of fatigue, right?
Okay.
So I went to bed at 3 p.m. that day. That was a Saturday morning.
Right.
Slept all night, got up probably around 9 o'clock, grabbed something to eat, went back to bed, right? Woke up the next day, never felt better. So I was back at the gym that day, the next day, just crushing workouts again. So I had a firsthand experience of what exactly I'm talking about, where the oxidative stress may have been a little much that day, and it's like taking one step back to take 100 forward. So there is a little bit of that, reaction that could take place. But at the end of the day, just like with exercise, like you overdo it, but it's great for you,
I've had several people not have those symptoms though, which makes me think, could you have been fighting something still at that time?
Absolutely.
Or, I've had 80-year-old 100-pound woman do it over 20 times and not have any of those symptoms.
Right.
And so it's kind of like, I wonder, what's the difference there? Could you
it's what's going on in the human body at
fighting
the time.
something at the moment?
Yeah. Yep. Exactly.
Also, your blood is running up that dialyzer at the same time, and so when your blood is going up and ozone is going counter current, and so in that dialyzer, what's happening is there's a large surface area of your blood being exposed to the gas, and when that's happening, we're essentially gently coating, the blood that I'm taking is deoxygenated blood from your veins. That blood already has a CO2 molecule attached to your hemoglobin.
Carbon dioxide.
And that's being taken to your lungs to be blown off. We're kind of interrupting that process and taking it and running it through a dialyzer, and we're exposing that blood to a gas that could be, it's a supercharged oxygen molecule. And so what it does, that hemoglobin that's in your blood already has a CO2 molecule attached to it. Mm-hmm. This is going to bind to the fats. So we're essentially binding to the monosaturated fatty acids in your blood, and then running that back into the other side. So we're using those fats as a oxygen carrying vessel essentially. And so as your cells go through normal Krebs cycle,
which is how it produces energy, basically.
Every single one of our cell has the mitochondria in our cell, and the mitochondria are known to be the powerhouse. The powerhouse is mitochondria make inside the mitochondria. There's called the matrix. The matrix is where the Krebs cycle happens. Mm-hmm. Krebs cycle is responsible for making adenosine triphosphate. That is the process where we get cellular energy. Ozone would essentially allow your body to utilize that extra oxygen molecule to for the Krebs cycle to become more efficient in your body. So your cells should be able to excrete waste better, take up nutrients better, all in all while being supported with excess oxygen. The theory behind this goes, I believe, through Otto Warburg's. They gave him a Nobel Prize in 1927.
Yeah, long time ago.
And he found out that cancer cells don't utilize oxygen at all. They're completely anaerobic cells. They're not part of us. And those cells have gone rogue. And what we're doing essentially is creating an environment that is much more aerobic. And we've been able to measure that through objective data, through a test through American Metabolic Labs.
Yep, PHI.
PHI is an enzyme that is produced through cancer cells because of anaerobic metabolism.
And real quick, there's PHI for prostate. That's not this test. This is polyhexoisomerase, which is an enzyme secreted by the cancer cells. Just wanted to clarify because a lot of people ask me.
Yes, thank you. And so that we want that level to be less than 30. If that level is elevated, it means that there's more anaerobic metabolism happening in the body in a cellular level. So there's an environment that's happening in the body that is very hypoxic and probably acidic.
Yeah, and low oxygen. And I'm sorry, I'll interrupt.
No,
low oxygen, right? Anytime you have low oxygen, lactic acid is going to develop.
Right.
So we increase the acidity and decrease the oxygen content, which is bad for the cell.
It's a breeding ground for cancer cells.
Right.
And so what we're doing when we use EBU with these low concentrations, we're able to saturate the blood in a way that allows the body to be able to be more aerobic. And so that blood that we're putting back in is going back to your body and is systemically being utilized in the moment. I've had some people feel dizzy at the time. I've had one instance where somebody's thrown up, which wasn't very pleasant. But out of, I think we've done about 700 EBU in these 2 years now. And
very minor,
if any. I've had 2-3 people pass out. I've had 2 women who are on their period have some pretty heavy cramping, I'll be honest. So I'm very cautious now as far as doing EBU if you are on your period. As the parameters specifically are that you should not have any active bleeding. I have to give you a blood thinner during the procedure to make sure that you don't clot in the tubing or in the filter, and that is a preventative thing. And the heparin has a very short half-life, so we don't have to. Your blood's not going to be thin for days on end. It's just for about 7 to 8 hours at the most.
It just makes it flow better. So you get more of the blood that's in your system.
Exactly.
Somewhere in, if there's 4 liters of blood, somewhere in the 1.8 to 3 liter range, you could filter and clean and oxygenate.
So it depends on how well you flow.
Yeah.
If you have really good blood vessels, typically you would flow much better. I don't have a meter that can tell me how much blood I've treated. I wish I did. That would be a good marker to be able to find. But I've been told through my training that it's about 2 to 4 liters, depending on how well you flow. It also depends on the size of the needle that I use. And so I'm using between 18 to 20 gauge needles. They're pretty good size needles. Yeah.
But to interject, you're also one of the better sticks, right? So the word around, and he's definitely worked on me many times, but he's known as the whisperer, right? So
we find him, we got it. I haven't had to turn anybody away for that reason. So
I've seen him do legs and feet.
Right? We've had to do that. So if you've had lymph nodes removed if you had breast cancer and you also had lymph node involvement and they removed the lymph nodes, and typically we don't want to use that arm that had lymph nodes removed if you had a lot of them. Now, if there was only like 1 or 2 lymph nodes removed and it was years ago and you've gotten blood pressures on this side or IVs on this side, I'm more inclined to using it than not. But if you've had lymph nodes removed on both sides and you don't do any IVs ever, or you've never had your blood pressure taken on your arm, then we could use the legs if we had to, and it's been successful that way. So it's been good.
Yeah, that's. I don't want to say you make it look easy, but you do. Like for others, it can be a challenge.
Thank
but
you,
I think Tanner's
thank you.
done it so long and is so good at it. So okay, so that gives you an idea from a standpoint of some of the mechanisms, right? This is why EBU is so good, because of the oxygen part of
It's
things.
supporting everything that
Right.
we're doing here, and so it also would help. It's like putting primer down before paint. If you're going to be doing chemo or something, you wouldn't want to do the day before, but doing it like a couple days before,
Mhm.
so that your body's ready to utilize that chemotherapy or even immunotherapy. From what we've seen, it's very supportive with all of those things.
All right, so let's go. We'll backtrack a little bit because we definitely jumped right in, right?
Yeah, we went through a lot.
We went through a
fast.
lot. The EBU itself, though, one thing that you read about it is a form of dialysis, right? Maybe not technically, but when you think of dialysis, you think of filtering,
Yeah,
right?
right.
So when that blood is out of the arm,
Yeah.
it goes through. Just give me an idea
So-
of.
We first start 2 IVs,
Mhm.
and we typically would want to find the vein that is going to be able to give us the most. And you can tell by the buoyancy of the vein. You can tell by how well it's going to give.
Yeah.
And so I pick a side. Doesn't matter which side. Some people would rather want the left side just because it's closer to their heart or whatever. But it doesn't matter. And so as long as I get the best vein to pull, the other vein needs to just be patent and open so that I could give blood back nicely, and there's no kinks in the tubing there. But so we start 2 IVs. As we start pulling, we run your blood through. It's a peristaltic pump. The pump is maneuvering the tubing in a way that is going to be pulling and pushing. And so it's going to start pulling blood from one line, and as your blood is going into the dialyzer, it's going from the bottom.
No, explain dialyzer.
Dialyzer is the filter that we're claiming it to be.
Yeah.
It's called the CTA filter.
Yeah.
Careful. I think we should be cautious calling it a filter.
Sure.
It's acting as more so as it's a cylinder that is creating a large surface area for your blood to be exposed to the gas. And ozone, over time, as your blood is flowing through it, will break down biofilms in the blood. And so biofilms can accumulate and accumulate in that dialyzer and make
Right.
it look like it's filtering something out.
Gotcha.
But that ozone is actually breaking down those biofilms.
Now, biofilms, just real quick, biofilms kind of protect microorganisms. So
Yeah.
it's something, a defense mechanism that, say, candida or parasites will use
Right.
to protect themselves. So getting rid of the biofilm
Yes.
is really critical. And if you've ever done a parasite cleanse or candida cleanse, something called acetaldehyde or biocidin, these are things that help
Heard of
break down the biofilm. So go
Heard of
ahead.
that.
Sorry.
So as your blood is going up the dialyzer and being essentially ozonized, it's going to be coming through a drip bypass chamber, and that bypass chamber has a small. This is where there's a small filter that if there were any clots that formed, it would catch. Also, it will prevent any bubbles from reaching the inflow line, so I'm not pushing any air into the patient. The only time I would have to troubleshoot that is if I had little things that come up that are really kind of difficult to explain without it here.
Sure, no worries. Yeah.
Or if there's air somehow that got in the line or something like that. But I typically don't have to troubleshoot any of that. But I could tell how well you're flowing. I could tell how well it's coming in. There's also a waste container. Now that waste container can accumulate some fluid. That fluid that accumulates in that filter or that waste container, I'm sorry, is my essentially it's my measurement for inflammation. So if there's a lot of fluid that accumulates in that filter, that tells me or whoever is doing the EBU that this patient is dealing with a lot of inflammation. I had a patient who was COVID positive. I didn't know it at the time, but he filled my waste container almost to the top, and that rarely happens. And come to find out, he had COVID, and that was kind of the weird times, 2021.
Sure.
But it definitely showed how that actually was true. He was dealing with active, infection, and that waste container filled up.
Yeah,
So
sure.
I'm able to look at that every single time after the procedure. After the procedure, we'll also be able to look at the patient's dialyzer to see if there's any sediment that had accumulated or biofilms that got broken down in. And we have some pictures that we'd be able to show that where we could see that those broken down chunks from an immune response, essentially, is what it also is.
Okay.
I've had patients who have had have stage 4 cancer, and their dialyzer is filled with all kinds of stuff.
Right.
I've also had patients who are stage 4 cancer where their dialyzer is fairly clean. And so
let's talk about the stuff, right? Because
Exactly.
you're with the EBOO and the oxygen and maybe cleaning it up a bit, right?
Right.
We're also talking about the ability of it to help with viral loads, to help with bacterial loads, to help with microorganisms, right? So explain, based on the process, how that works.
Okay, so when you have an immune response, typically our thymus gland is is supported with oxygen. We need oxygen, and so our thymus gland puts out T cells. It also puts out natural killer cells, and so these cells are the main immune fighting cells.
Yep.
Ozone can stimulate those essentially to be active, saying like, hey, you got something going on, let's get to work. And so when it comes to pathogens, ozone is majorly antimicrobial, so it's going to kill viruses. I mean, I've had patients with herpes, I've had patients with Epstein-Barr, and I've had doctors coming back, hey, this has worked. I had a negative Epstein-Barr test when last week they were through the roof. And so I've definitely seen it work as far as lowering Epstein-Barr levels in patients who are actively infected, or even herpes infections. So there's definitely an antiviral component to this. Fungus is also going to break down the bilayer for fungus. So if you have a systemic fungal infection where you're dealing with like jock itch and ringworm or something like that,
or systemic candida, right?
It should lower that, essentially that load, that pathogen load that the body is having to fight, just because it's antimicrobial.
Right.
Now we could increase the concentration on those individuals. That's where that fine line is. There's a little knob on the machine where I can increase the concentration. Each light goes up 7, so it goes 7, 14, 21, 28, and then
what's that equate to? The
gamma.
Gamma.
The gamma, and the gamma of ozone. So it'd be 7 gamma being put out at 1 liter per minute of oxygen.
Gotcha.
And so when you input that and you expose the gas to in a higher concentration, you're essentially going to kill more.
Right.
And which could be good depending on the patient's. I've had a patient. He had a systemic parasite infection on his skin. It was on his face, his arms.
Right. I remember.
And he did EBOO about 5 times, and he did the safe method. Okay.
Yeah. Right.
That's
which we'll talk about. Yep.
After about the 4th time, you could see his skin. You could see granulation tissue forming, and it didn't look like it looked like his skin was getting eaten away, kind of like staph would be doing. And he was able to retest, and it showed very low. Where he eventually got put on antibiotics, but it was beneficial for him to start out this way.
Sure.
You could tell, and he told me every single time, he's like, this is definitely making a huge difference. I mean, I've had people that are coming back from when we first started doing this.
Sure.
So,
so part of it is with oxygen, right? Bad stuff doesn't thrive in an oxygenated environment. That's number one, right?
Right.
So between increasing the oxygen, increasing the antioxidants, the immune system, right? Not triggering the opposite, which is the inflammatory cytokine response.
Right.
You're basically allowing an environment that's very conducive for your body to be able to fight, and your cells to be able to be more, I would say, have a higher defense against being overrun by these.
Yeah, absolutely. Right? It's supporting the intracellular health of our immune system, of all of our cells.
Yeah. It's just, I mean, from top to bottom, it's one of those things where it's too, I always say it's too easy. So
I feel blessed I got to learn this, and I learned from Alan, who was one of the inventors of this process about 20 years ago. From what I understood, it was a family project, and he wanted to essentially create a more, all the other ozone treatments that it seems like that are out there are very kind of, I don't want to say tic-tacky, but kind of, they don't flow as well because it's difficult to put your blood to the gas kind of thing. So there's other ways you could utilize ozone. You could draw blood into a bag and just drip it and put ozone in the bag with your blood. or you can do the 10 pass treatment. But with 10 pass, which I do like, it's made with glass, but your blood, that when I'm mixing your blood with the ozone, the only blood that's getting exposed to the gas is at the very top. And so that's why you have to swirl it, you know?
Right.
And so with EBU, it's really nice because it's a large amount of your blood being treated and it's a lower concentration, so it's not likely for me to create an oxidative event.
Right.
While supporting and I'm able to give you some fluids with it. And yeah.
So let's talk about, we'll go in this, there's a safe method to this, right? I want Tanner to talk about that because there's two different ways to do this.
Yes.
And then when, the one that we've been talking about is appropriate, when the safe method is appropriate.
Okay. So you could do both from what I've learned. It just seems like with safe, you're able to filter it a little bit more. The reason being is because the way the blood is going into the dialyzer. With the standard one, which is the one we've been talking about where it goes bottom up, with safe, it goes top down. And the way your blood is actually saturating that dialyzer is in to out.
Okay.
And so it has to go through many more little tubules, these hair-like tubules where your ozone is passing through, going top to bottom still.
Yep.
And as your blood is going through those little tubules, there's more surface area created. And so your blood is actually getting deposited more oxygen. And when your blood gets to the bottom of that dialyzer, it separates like a SST tube. You know what those are? Those are the blood test tubes. The SST tube will move your serum up and pull your platelet down.
Okay.
Meaning it's going to pull it's going to pull the serum to the top of the surface to spill over into the waste container.
Okay.
While giving you back your red blood cells.
I got you.
So it's EBU with the plasmapheresis.
Okay.
What it is. So
yeah.
if you are dealing with fluid overload in any way, or if you have swelling in your legs and feet, but
ascites, right? Some type of ascites, or even
it depends on your albumin levels. Okay. So if the patient has low albumin, we're not going to necessarily pull fluid from that extracellular fluid.
Yep.
We need that fluid to be in the vascular system for us to pull it off.
Okay.
And so if they have normal albumin levels but they have swelling, that would tell me that they are dealing with either a kidney issue, a heart issue, or some type of fluid overload issue where they've accumulated too much fluid for some reason. And we are able to pull off that excess fluid. Now, when we've pulled off that excess fluid, there has been all kinds of stuff in these waste containers, and we've drawn them out and we've put them under a microscope, and there's been quite a few times where we don't know what they are.
Yeah, right.
And so, which is kind of scary.
But it's a little bit of a funny story because we Tanner and I would talk about this. We're like, man, I want to know what this stuff is, right?
Yeah, right.
So he actually broke open. And then we took some of the contents out, put it under a microscope, right? Or put it on a slide.
Right.
Use the microscope. We're looking at it, and we're like, we don't have anything to compare it to.
Well, not just that, but we've sent it out through LabCorp.
Oh, you did?
Yeah.
Oh, I didn't know that. I didn't know that.
Yeah, we sent out, I believe, Dr. Carlton's, because she had some stuff. Hopefully she doesn't mind. But she was like, I want to send mine out.
Yeah,
so she sent it out, and the data and also Dr. Rowe, they both sent their own out.
Okay.
And we sent it for pathology report.
Yeah.
And it came back as inconclusive. Specimen was dead on arrival. Can't tell you what it was. Something like that.
Gotcha.
So they didn't give us a very straight answer, which makes me just think they don't know either.
Yeah, well, here's the thing. If you're looking at something under a microscope, you kind of have to have
a reference
key.
point. Yeah, exactly.
You have to have a key to refer to and be like, oh, it's not that, it's not that.
Right.
We would just have to start. We didn't think through it as well as we probably should have.
Well,
but we it was for the right reason.
I mean, I think when we first started doing it, it was just to see what it looked like under there.
Right.
Sure. And so, and we've done it time and time again, and some things are looking different and some things are looking very similar to previous things. I mean, it's one of these things where Teresa, she has like 20 years experience with the live cell.
Right.
And she's looking at me like, I don't know what this is.
Yeah,
you know? And so it just makes me realize, how different we all are compared to each other, and what could be in us could be different, and what we've been exposed to is different, and whether we've taken that on could be different as well, as far as who's consumed more of junk than other people. You know, I mean, I know our air quality is not like it used to be. Our food is not like what it used to be.
Right. Right.
So even our shower water is not what it used to be. So it's
well, you bring up a good point, because with that, right, as a tool in the toolbox, let's put this in context of if we're talking about a chronic disease, right, or a chronic issue like cancer. You're looking at the plan, right? You know, you hear us talk about the 4 pillars all the time. Pillar 3 is going to be, we want an immune boost, right? We want to oxygenate, we want to alkalize, we want to increase the polarity or the energy of the cell, biocharger, things like that. And then we want to look inside of the cell. That's where the oligo scan comes in really handy. And look at the trace minerals, the vitamin content, because all of those things are going to create a cellular environment that allows for that cell to optimize its function,
right.
Which means it's less conducive for cancer growth. That's the key. So that the EBU fits into that because of, number one, it helps clear out some of those microorganisms, right? That create fuel to the fire.
Right.
So if you have too many gasolines igniting the fire, the immune system's going to be overworking, oxidative stress, damage to the cell. So if you can utilize the EBU as a tool in the toolbox to, number one, help clear out junk, right? So we have a protocol, I'll bring it up, where we do an EBU chelation about 4 or 5 days later, followed by an EBU, another 4 or 5 days later, a chelation, followed by a final EBU. So the whole idea is we're trying to clear out, like obviously clear out the junk as best we can, right? Oxygenate the cells, and then when we do the chelation, pull the heavy metals out of the cells into the bloodstream, and then the EBU then takes it away.
Yes.
Right?
Well, the thing is, the heavy metals are fairly small.
Right.
And so I feel like it'd be difficult for us to claim that the filters are filtering out heavy metals.
Right.
But what it's definitely going to do, as your blood is going into your circulation, ozone is a chelator.
Right.
So it's doing a chelation in its own way, where you just got a EDTA, which is an agent that will draw those heavy metals out of the cells. And so, essentially it's all just supporting each other. Is what it's doing. But there is a protocol that we have that are doing that. I also noticed people or patients who have gotten Plaquex the day before EBU are giving me much more sediment in the filter, which makes what Plaquex is. It's essentially it's an artery cleansing agent that we use here that will, I believe it's also phosphatidylcholine, which will bind to the plaque along our walls and arteries, and then over time your body will process that. And so it should help lower plaque buildup in your arteries and decrease atherosclerosis. Well, in doing so, when you do that the day before doing EBU, the filter is covered with all kinds of stuff. And sometimes it's colored and sometimes it's not. What I mean is like almost orange, and then sometimes it's white, and sometimes it's little speckles, and everybody's different. And that's kind of the magic, I think, of it, in a little ways. Like, it's really made me realize how different we all are, even though we are, all human.
Yeah, and look, when you're using something like that in conjunction with the other modalities, right? So I was just working with a patient before I came up here. That's why I was a little late, and she's new, and she's wondering, she's going through chemo. She just started chemo. And she's wondering, what can I do to help? So she's a potential new patient, right? So I was explaining to her the checklist that I have. I was explaining to her the pillars, going through the testing and what she needs for surveillance and circulating tumor cell activity. Obviously the STAR phase, the kill phase, we talked about repurposed meds, we talked about she's going through the chemo. But then the big thing was supporting the cell, right? So we have to make sure that we're immune boosting, and then some of those immune boosters can also be anti-cancer and cancer killing, just vitamin C being one of those, and then the oxygen part. So I explained to her that whether it's EBU and you're getting ozone and oxygenation of the tissues, which will naturally decrease lactic acid, right? Or hyperbaric or something like that. The point is, you use these things in conjunction with other things, right? It's not, I don't know that I would ever call anything that we have a standalone treatment, or it's like significantly better than others, but when you're talking about creating an antioxidant effect and an anti-inflammatory effect, and you're killing off, microorganisms and cleansing for the most part, right? Cleaning things up. I mean, again, I don't want to overstate it, but the EBOO is definitely one of the, I think in my 25 years in the business, of healthcare, I think it's one of the best, if not the best modalities that I've seen personally, even felt. Right?
Yeah, I mean, when I did EBOO, I didn't have any negative symptoms at all. I felt just very relaxed. Honestly, I felt relaxed. I noticed that I felt relaxed.
Yeah.
But as far as supporting all modalities here, absolutely. You just would not want to do ozone at the same time you're doing like high dose vitamin C. High dose vitamin C, I believe, has an oxidative stress to it as well. Yep. You wouldn't want to do it with hydrogen peroxide. You would not want to do it with the same day as hyperbaric. Also, they don't want you to go in the sauna. They don't want you to do any hot tubs. They don't want you doing ice baths. Anything that can kind of like stimulate your immune system, they don't want to add to it necessarily.
So that goes back to the hormesis, right?
Exactly.
If you're doing a little bit of oxidative stress to the cell, it turns on the great things.
Right.
If you start layering that
hammering,
your body's going to definitely create, it's too much oxidative stress, which turns on that, I talked about NFK beta. It turns on that pathway, which turns on a lot of inflammatory type of reactants and stimulators. So yeah, and then vitamin C, like as an example, we don't want to do anything before, right? So just contraindications, because it'll pretty much clear it out. Right?
Yeah,
it'll negate the effect of it. Correct?
Well, definitely before. it would be difficult to draw blood, from what I've noticed, if they've done an IV prior.
Right.
But
isn't it realistic that it would just it would kind of
potentially oxidize it?
Yeah. Right. Potentially. So we go. It's okay to do it maybe the next day or the day after, or whatever.
That's exactly it.
But you don't want to do something like that.
The same goes with chemo. You wouldn't want to do EBOO right before chemo. I mean, we have a 36-hour, I think, window where if you did EBOO on a Monday, you could do chemo on the Wednesday. Right. And as long as you get one full day of no oxidative, no ozone in between. And then that has shown to be a very good setup for the load of chemotherapy that we have with Trish here.
Yeah.
And people responded really well doing it that way. And so that's kind of, seems to be one of the tickets there. There's also, Oligo scan is a big one, because that's going to tell us about, I'm sure you've talked about that on this a ton of times.
I love it.
You're dealing with, it'll tell you about your oxidative stress. It'll tell you about your minerals and deficiencies or excessiveness of certain minerals. It also will tell you if you are burdened with heavy metals, vitamins. It's a really cool AI. I think that it touches on. But when you pull that into the realm, it's like getting more data, right? And so we are able to replace minerals that could be diminished with that, and then with EBOO, we could essentially, if you are tolerating, if with the oxidative stress measurement, it'll tell us if you would benefit or not benefit from EBOO.
Yeah,
and
for sure.
So I think that's a good one to test before, because of that specifically.
Yeah, that so the oligo scan is. I did a little. What is it? What's the Instagram?
Oh, okay.
I lost that, but so I did a little Instagram on it, and I've been doing it for the last 3 months or so. Okay. That's a great test.
Yeah.
Because you probably heard me talking about it, but when you're able to look inside the cell as opposed to extracellular, right? We can have all the magnesium we want in the blood.
Right.
If it can't get into the cell, it's not going to help, your cellular function, obviously, right? Feed the cells, and it's not going to support the Krebs cycle, the mitochondria, all that stuff. So
central nervous system, everything.
All of it. Yeah. And if you really delve deep, there's a lot of practitioners, scientists, even that are scientific literate, that will say a lot of conditions that we have in our society are mineral deficiencies.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah. So the point I'll make is, with the oligo, I'll touch on it briefly. We can look inside of the cell, and then if there are deviations or deficits with minerals or vitamins, then we look at the heavy metals. Because the heavy metals, what they do is they bind to the cell wall.
Yeah.
And if they're bound to the cell wall, it creates inflammation, right? And so things don't get in properly, and they certainly don't get out properly.
Right.
But not only that, the heavy metals if it has the similar atomic number, if you will, to the trace mineral, it will bind and absorb the trace mineral. So we can see if you're low on silicone, if you're low on magnesium, we know, or phosphorus, we know that the mercury, the aluminum is going to be high.
Yeah.
So it's predictable that way too. So then again, we use that in conjunction. So as an example, going back to the EBU, right? We could, if we find that you're low on trace minerals, obviously we could substitute those, right? I love Quinton water.
Yeah,
I love our trace minerals.
We can give those after EBU as well.
Yeah, I think I tell everybody, do Quinton water, like across the board.
Yeah,
so
me too.
If you've never heard of it, it's concentrated seawater basically, but it has 72 trace minerals in it.
Yeah.
Right? It covers
Massive.
Massive. So, and then today, I know we're getting a little off topic, but I'll bring it back. Basically, in today's world, we're the nutrients are deficient in our soil, right?
Right. Yeah.
Gut health is compromised, so we have reduced gut basically absorption, and then if you have heavy metals at the cellular level, they're blocking the absorption of these trace minerals. So the point I'll make is, when you're looking at that, and then you see, hey, we have these heavy metals. One of the ways to clear them, we could do, like Cellcore has a foundational protocol. There's an advanced push catch with Quicksilver, and then use the EBU in conjunction.
Yeah.
It's like this 1-2 punch.
To support, and you could do other pushes like the PK push that we have.
Right.
That helps support HEPAR and PK. These are these pushes that we give after doing chemotherapy to help support your liver to process those agents, and you can give those after EBU as well. We've had no issues with those. Some of the mineral IVs I have, it's been kind of tough. We've given the MitoFit once, and that patient, he felt very flushed, which there's niacin in it, but I didn't want to push it on him, so we stopped it. But there's probably more that we could do after EBU. It's just we're also kind of like erring on the side of caution.
Sure.
We don't want to give something that would essentially stop it from doing what it's supposed to do, or layer too much on top of it, so.
Agree. Yeah, Kelly asked about it's Quinton. Yeah, the Quinton, that's what we're talking about. The Quinton water.
The little ampules that you break, it's glass, and we can give that in IV form, and it's
that works really
well. It's great, and so that's something that we probably should figure out to implement with EBU, because if we're potentially and with chelation, if we're potentially taking some of these heavy metals off, it's likely that we could be taking some minerals with it. So it's good to replace those minerals.
And it can't hurt, right?
No.
We do the push, so it's a Quinton push.
Yes.
And I'll tell
you. We do IV drips as well. We do.
I had the push. That works. Every time I get an IV, I want the Quinton. So there's definitely something to the low levels of these trace minerals. Right? Getting into the cell, because when you get that, and you probably experienced it as well, there's definitely a noticeable difference.
Oh yeah, you get like a warm sensation in your body when you get that push. Kind of like contrast, if you've ever received contrast before a PET scan. But it's not. There's no bad heavy metals in the Quinton.
No.
There's no gadolinium
it's all good
or anything
stuff.
like
that.
I
actually feel good. Like I definitely, it's a noticeable difference.
I've definitely felt like ready to exercise afterwards, where you felt, energized. Energized from it, and that made me realize, oh my gosh, I must be deficient.
No question.
And I did my oligo scan, and that wasn't all that great either. So I'm like, I need to do some of these things that we're talking about,
They hear me say that all the time. It's like, look, our exercise, our supplements, my workouts, or my foods, which I've done for years, it's just not enough anymore. Like, you have to go deeper to look at, these wellness strategies. So
says Kim this.
Plasma hypertonic 30 ampules of marine plasma. Yes, that's exactly right, Kim.
I don't give the hypertonic. I've been giving the isotonic.
Or iso.
It's the same tonicity as your blood. And so as far as drinking them, that you could do that as well, I believe, with the hypertonic and all that. But I've only given intravenously the isotonic Quinton marine plasma. I believe it's extracted from phytoplankton when they're in full bloom.
That's exactly right.
And so, which is kind of cool. I've never seen that in real life, but.
And that's where they get that concentration, because there's 72 trace minerals within that. The difference, just to give a quick clarity, I'll do a little bit of the trace minerals as
Yeah.
well, Aussie trace minerals.
Right.
And I'll just put that in my water as I drink it throughout the day. But that only has maybe, your key trace minerals.
Right.
It might only have, I think, 5, maybe 6.
Yeah.
I could be mistaken.
The same with like saline. Saline's just sodium and chloride. I mean,
Right.
we need those essentially, but we're not really replacing those minerals or getting them. I mean, a lot of, parasites like heavy metals and things like that. And so it looks like Mary asked, how do you balance the removal of
heavy
metals and parasites that live with them?
Yeah.
So eradicating the parasites would be number one.
Yeah.
And so
Yeah.
there's a lot of
pecking order.
there's a and then you could still do Ibu if you're doing these parasite cleanses and stuff like that.
Yep.
There's not going to harm you in any way. If anything, it would just support your body from eliminating these things.
Mm-hmm.
But if you could take certain binders that could bind to heavy metals in your gut or zeolites, these things will help potentially your gut actually get rid of these things. I personally have experience with that, but I don't really want to share that. But I've had a lot of people share things with me, and I've kind of just followed them. I've learned a lot from patients as well who have lived through these cleanses and stuff like that.
Yep.
And so Kim Lee says, my doctor does IV ozone. Is this the same thing? As far as the same thing as Ibu, I don't know. It depends on how they're actually utilizing the ozone, because there's different ways of utilizing it and applying it to your blood.
Right.
So that doctor could be drawing your blood like 120 milliliters worth, putting it in an IV bag, and then pumping ozone into the IV bag, and then just dripping it and calling that ozone IV. We do something similar to that. It's called UVBI. It's ultraviolet blood ozone irradiation. It's definitely like the lower form of utilizing this, but it's not bad. It's a good stepping stone, I think, through a lot of this stuff. But Ibu is probably just the most fanciest and I would say
just thorough
way of expressing your blood to the gas, and doing it in a way that is very gentle and thorough and saturating essentially your fatty acids in your bloodstream.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, you know what we'll do while we have some time. I'll open up the Q&A. We just blew through. We kind of blew through everything.
We wanted to talk.
Yeah. So, and hopefully it was informative. I think it was pretty good. But let's go through here. We kind of did some of this, and I'll regroup at the end. I do want to talk about, one of the things that you hear me getting into all the time is the longevity part, right? Mm-hmm. And longevity, because you're doing a lot of this too.
Yeah,
longevity really equates to optimal cellular health, which allows for cells to heal faster than they break down. That's longevity, but that's also anti-disease, right?
Yeah, right.
It's all one thing. So what I'm doing more in the clinic, I've transitioned more to patient-centric as opposed to I was running and managing healing overall.
Right.
I pulled back a little bit on that because the need for patient care has grown.
Right.
So I'm more involved in the patient care. But one of the things that I really love to do is I love to work on wellness and health and optimization of just performance and cellular health, so you get optimal function, right?
Yes. So your body can do what it's been doing all these years.
Exactly.
Like when we were young.
All these things that I'm learning, I want to make sure we're implementing, and so that's on the prevention part, where we're making sure we're doing the right testing. We're looking at things, everything from gut health to hormones to cortisol levels from stress, and then working with the patient themselves. Hey, do we want to look at heavy metals and toxins and chemicals?
Should we be testing your house for mold?
Exactly. Based on symptoms, right? And then do we want to do some of these anti-cancer protocols too, or early detection? Do we want to do Gallery tests? Do we want to do a Prenuvo MRI? Do we want to do some of these tumor markers? Do we want to do, and it all depends on the person, right?
Yes.
And what they're presenting with.
Right.
So we don't have to go down all those roads, but that's the part where, I think I love the most. Also, I coordinate the cancer care, right? I'm the kind of the quarterback. I have a checklist for everybody. I go through it thoroughly. I make sure they get what they need. But I feel like working on the wellness side right, is really where we need a lot of work.
Focus.
And that's what I'm doing it for myself.
I love
so
it.
It's like,
yeah, same.
right?
Yeah.
So what you see here on the screen is the personalized prevention, early detection, human optimization. That's the key, right? So yes, I tell everybody, if you have a chronic disease like cancer, right, or I call it a symptom, if you have the symptom of cancer, the same things that are going to prevent it are the same things that are going to cure it, right?
Mm-hmm.
Or help clean it up to help get no evidence of disease, I should say,
Yeah.
right? They're one and the same. It's getting on them early, right, via the early detection test, via the looking at the blood, looking at the cells, looking at all that,
And the scans.
yeah, and the scans, and making a good plan of optimization.
Right.
Like I don't know.
Yeah.
That's my thing
Right.
here moving forward. So if anybody needs that or wants that, just come in. I've seen probably a few patients this week alone that may have seen this and are working towards that, and I think it's wonderful.
From reviewing supplements to
Just- So intake, right? They come in, we go over their full history, they send in the paperwork, and then I get an idea of what symptoms they have. I go through their systems, I go through everything from, are they fatigued? Are they achy and sore? How's their gut health? Do they have any of those symptoms? How do they sleep?
Huge.
How are you fatigued? Do you have energy? Are you under a lot of stress? I mean, we go through all those questions,
Yeah.
and then devise a testing protocol from those, and give the options of, hey, based on this, a family history, maybe we should make sure we're doing, a couple of these tests that could do like the liquid biopsy, that could do early detection of circulating tumor cell activity, or some of the cancer markers. So it gives me the ability, everything that we talk about here, it gives me the ability to work that in on a patient, a wellness patient.
Yeah.
Phenomenal. So anyway, I wanted to mention that because that's a big part of, I think, what I wanted to do for the year 2024, and so we're starting to facilitate that.
Awesome.
So if you need anything, let me know. I'll be happy to help you with that. Okay, so obviously we went through this. We wanted to show this because what Tanner's talking about here and some of the structures that he's talking about, it was hard to visualize. And again, I was a little late getting up here, so I wanted to get right into it. But this gives you an idea, and just take them through, Tan.
Okay,
blood
I can
out,
see
right?
our mouse.
Yeah,
Okay.
so blood out,
Yes,
right? Goes out this
yes,
arm,
exactly.
up through here, goes into the machine, right?
It doesn't go into the machine. It goes into this circular, this is called a peristaltic pump.
Okay.
And as your blood is going this way, it's going up and in, and then it comes down. As it comes down, there's a little tube right here. This tube is where your blood is starting to enter the dialyzer. This is your dialyzer, or CTA filter is what they're also calling it. And as your blood is coming up, you can see a line right over here. This tube right here, it goes all the way up to the top right here into this blue section, and that is where ozone is being pushed down into this dialyzer, all the way through and into, you can't see it, but there's a waste container behind Dr. Carlton here. And as the blood is going up, ozone is going down, it's going counter current, and then this is where the blood it comes down, up and around into this drip chamber, and this is where it's coming in. Your blood is the real wow factor with it is how pretty your blood looks coming into you.
Yeah.
It is a bright, beautiful red compared to the blood that's coming out. The blood that's coming out, it should look darker. It's deoxygenated.
Right.
I wouldn't, if it came out really bright red, that would not make me think that I'm in the vein.
No,
Dr.
right,
Roney.
yeah, you're
I would think I'm in the artery. So I want it to come out looking a little darker. It's a good sign for me. And so
I could see you saying, well, that's not good.
yeah, I mean, it's happened before. I mean, if I've hit the
When
artery,
you're
I
younger,
can tell.
right? When you're a younger nurse.
I am not going to be touching anybody's arteries. So this is where the ozone concentration is. So you can
Okay.
see a little red light. That is 1. So there's a bunch of little lights that I could go up to.
And that's
that
the
would
gamma you're talking
exactly.
about. Yeah,
So
7,
this
14, 21.
So she was at 7. We could increase that to 2 lights if we wanted to, if you're dealing with an active cold or viral infection or Lyme disease, that's where I've increased the concentration. With cancer, I've usually kept most patients around 7. I have not really bumped them because of that.
Yeah.
I would not
You don't
want.
want too
There's
much.
there's no need for that. And so this
There
is
could only
a
be
heart
downside,
monitor, and we don't really need to use that. Honestly, we're not having it. I've not had anybody deal with any arrhythmias during this. The only time I've had some issues is if somebody's felt a little dizzy, and it's similar to if you have trouble with blood draws and you're likely to faint, or you've had this experience before. There's a breathing exercise that we could do that would help prevent that from happening, and we could make it to where you don't get sweaty and diaphoretic and feeling like you're going to pass out. I have things in place immediately where I can reverse that situation and actually walk you through a breathing exercise.
Mm-hmm.
The breathing exercise is that box breathing we were kind of talking about earlier, where you take a 4-second inhale and you hold that for 7 seconds, and then you blow it off with your mouth over 8 seconds. If you do that in 3 rounds, you're going to decrease your sympathetic tone. You're going to decrease the production of cortisol in your blood. You're going to feel very relaxed. And so that's what anybody should do if they're dealing with an anxiety attack or something like that. If you go through that breathing, it's a really good tool to have. I've also been a big promoter of Wim Hof breathing. Wim Hof is one of these things where there's a lot of scrutiny involved, but especially with the hyperventilation part. I've had long conversation with Dr. Keneally about it, and our CO2 in our bloodstream is actually essential. And so the Wim Hof breathing, I'm not as huge of a promoter as I was actually just very recently. I want to touch base with some patients that I've actually recommended those breathing exercises to, because you'll blow off too much CO2. But anyways, back to EBOO. With Dr. Carlton here, blood going up, and it's going to be returning back obviously into this side. You could kind of see it's a lot brighter on this side compared to coming out. I mean, there's another slide that would show some of the stuff that we're talking about. Okay, this is a better picture where you can see the blood that's coming out of this patient's arm coming from this pump right here. It's a lot darker coming up and around here. As her blood is climbing, you can see it's getting brighter, and so she is getting a good saturation of the ozone at, it looks like I have one light here, 7 gamma again. This is a patient who had received Plaquex prior. I've had other pictures that have a lot more sediment that has built up that did not do Plaquex. So it doesn't necessarily, you have to do Plaquex to get some of this plaque or whatever this is out of here. You could some patients have just had an accumulation of that stuff ongoing. It seems like once I've seen it happen, I've recommended them to come in again within a couple weeks or so, or a week. Typically these individuals are on a protocol where they're already going to be coming in, but every time I've seen this, the next time they've done it, it's less. And then the next time they've done it, it's less. Yeah, sure. And eventually, it's very clear and pretty, and you can't see any sediment in there. And that's the goal, because that means we've drawn out all of that waste product from these patients' blood, and so we're essentially assisting the liver and the kidneys and your bodily functions, so they don't have to process it. We're drawing it out, so your body doesn't have to.
Quick question. So with ozone, right? Is it also oxygenating the blood beyond ozone? Meaning, is oxygen and ozone given?
No, just
okay.
O3.
Just O3.
So on the side here, there's a big tank. The big tank is filled with oxygen, pressurized oxygen. Yeah. That tank is feeding this machine O2. Oops.
Sorry.
The next machine, what the machine is doing is splitting the oxygen molecule and making O1. O1 by itself is very unstable, so it'll bind to O2, and then that creates O3. If you don't want to breathe it in, it's something that is a big deal in my opinion. Breathing in ozone could potentially dry out the little alveoli sacs in our lungs and create some damage in your lung tissue. It's not good. So if you've had a little bit of if you do some type of ozone treatments at home and you've smelt it, it's not that big of a deal. But if you're smelling it chronically or for every day for weeks on weeks at a time, it can definitely catch up to you. So I'd be careful with ozone exposure. Breathing in ozone, you do not want to do that. It's definitely a different case when your blood is exposed to it at a low concentration.
Good. So good explanation. All right, let's go up. Let's take some questions. So asking, wondering whether the EBU machine takes 1 hour or 3 hours, and the price of each treatment. So probably about an hour. Right?
So it takes me some time to go over the consent with you. I would like to make sure you don't have any active bleeding because I have to give you that blood thinner during the procedure. I have to make sure that you haven't had surgery in the last 30 to 40 days. I have to make sure that you're not on your period. I have to make sure that you are not on a blood thinner. If you are on a blood thinner, I don't need to be giving you as much heparin as I would be giving you. There's some things like that I would need to go over you before the procedure, and then I would once I make sure everything is cool, we would start 2 IVs, and then drawing your blood into the filter. I have to prime these membranes in the filter before starting the other side. So there's going to be a period of time where your blood is going to be coming out of you, and it depends on how well your vein flows. But it takes about 2 to 5 minutes, and then I connect the other side. And so I have to make sure there's no bubbles in the line and stuff like that. Once I set it, and once I get the other side connected, I set a time. I hit the timer for 1 hour. So I would say the process takes about an hour and a half.
Yeah. Totally.
If everything goes perfect, I have to do some things before I have to, take down the previous patients and clean things and stuff like that. But nobody's blood is ever going in. I've had this question where, if my blood is going into the machine, is it going in after somebody else's blood has gone in the machine? No blood is going into the machine. Everybody gets their own tubing. Everybody gets their own dialyzer. Nothing is, and those are sterile. None of that is
brand new.
And it's sterile. So it's nothing that's been anybody else's blood has ever ran through. Or anything like that. So that is I feel like that'd be kind of a silly question to ask, but it's actually been asked frequently.
Sure. Yeah.
No, if my mother was in these seats, I would want it to be done the way we are doing it here.
Yeah. So the cost, Peggy, each treatment's $1,200, right? And just so you know, via market analysis, which we've done, the next cheapest we found is $1,800, with the average being about $2,200.
Yeah.
When we did the market analysis. So we do that because obviously the clinic has so many things, and there's a need for people to do multiple things. So we try to price it in a way that is, at least well below market, analysis.
I also believe that they could be having a physician running the machine, and they may have to pay that physician a little bit more than what I get paid. Maybe necessarily. I mean, I don't know.
Yeah.
But I definitely am confident that we're the best in, if not the U.S., definitely in California, with just the whole process and how I'm confident in this.
Yeah, I agree with that 100%. Does it help with high hemoglobin, high red blood cell, high hematocrit, high alkaline phosphatase?
So as far as high hemoglobin, high red blood cell, high hematocrit, you potentially could have excess iron. And so it depends on what the cause is, what's causing you to have this high hemoglobin. Are you
chromatosis? Do you have
So getting to the root cause, Gina, that would be essentially number one. If you had some high iron levels from some liver stuff, we could do a therapeutic phlebotomy where we would just draw off excess blood from you.
Yeah, great question, Tanner. Real quick, while I'm thinking about, sorry to interrupt. How much blood loss could there be? Not much, right?
Well, once I return all your blood back to you, there's going to be a very small amount of blood, like you could see in the dialyzer to the left picture.
Yeah.
You could see that those little tubules are still saturated with some red blood.
Sure.
So the amount of blood that I'd be keeping afterwards would be around 50 milliliters. It is not very much. It looks like a lot more than it is. As far as lowering hemoglobin levels or lowering
Not
red blood
enough.
cells. It's not going to.
That's what I was.
It's not going to be. It's not going to be enough. You would need to do a therapeutic phlebotomy or
250
potentially.
or more.
Yes.
Yeah, 500 sometimes.
The amount of blood that's out of your body at once is about 250 milliliters from when you're flowing, and both arms are connected.
Which is why if somebody's anemic or low hemoglobin,
yes,
we have to be careful.
So that's another thing. If your hemoglobin is lower than 10, I believe it's deciliter per ml, you are in a very fine line where, the risk versus benefit, because I'm going to be keeping some blood. If you're already anemic, I don't want to, or getting closer to, if let's say you're doing chemo and your blood counts are low, we wouldn't want to keep blood that you essentially need. So then we would pivot and do something else at that point.
So Sharma asked, can EBU be used with somebody who has stents inserted in an artery?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
And then already diagnosed with blooded artery.
A blocked artery. From a blood clot. If there's a blocked artery, I wonder what it's from, whether it's from trauma or how long has this been blocked?
Atherosclerosis.
So those are pretty good questions. I would need to touch base with your doctor on what would be the reason why the artery is blocked, or if there's a blood clot or something like that, how long has it been there? Where is it? Are you on blood thinners because of that blood clot? You're saying a blocked artery. I'm not dealing with any arteries per se. I'm using your venous system, and so I'm not going to be touching the artery. The only thing that would be exposed to the artery would be the ozone or the blood thinner, and I don't see really any issues with those.
So Peggy, it's called the oligoscan. It's OLIGOSCAN, oligoscan. So that
I hope I answered your question, Sharma. I would be curious to what is causing the blocked artery.
Plaque X would be something.
Yeah,
that would help that.
Sure.
Ketone water somewhere. Do you make it at the center? Yeah, you could purchase it either at the center, this perfectly healthy store, or you can purchase it online. Either way. A friend just had a stress test and it was determined he has blockages. Okay, so right. Okay.
So if that's from calcified arteries, or if that is from atherosclerosis,
most of the time
it would be beneficial for both, I would say.
Yeah, right. Yeah, and then like you said, Plaque X, and then EBU, Plaque X, EBU.
That would be something I would ask your friend's doctor. If your friend came here, that is something that they would probably be implementing and putting them on something called Plaque X.
Mm-hmm. All right. Okay. So all in all, I think we went through pretty much everything. What conditions benefit? Who is the ideal candidate to receive the treatment? Great. That's a great one. Right. So obviously we use it in the cancer world, right? For everything that we just spoke about. But we also use it strategically for people with mold, for people with viral loads, for people with some of these causes that actually, fuel the fire, if you will, and create that oxidative load. So we use it to try to clean up those things, create more oxygen, less acidity, cell health, optimal function, the whole 9 yards.
For sure. There's definitely patients that do not have any health conditions that are also coming in, just doing it for kind of like their
prevention.
Yes, hyperbaricing their blood. They're doing it for optimal health. So.
The athletes use this. It works really well with athletes. Trying to stay as healthy and as optimally function as possible. Yeah. They use this. They'll use the hyperbaric. They'll use very, very good for wellness. And a lot of these pathogens that are in the body, plus your autoimmunes, works great for autoimmune, works great for cancer, as part of the big picture. Yeah. So, okay, let's see here. All right, typical treatment, we talked about that. Last chat about the science and mechanisms behind EBU success. For example, Dr. Keneally has mentioned several cases where her PHI levels were lowered in a patient with cancer. We did discuss that PHI, that polyhexoisomerase.
Yes.
And
that lab test tells us how much anaerobic metabolism happening. Typically, if you have a history of cancer or have active tumor, those PHI levels are elevated. We've seen them north of 200. We want them to be less than 30. After doing about 5 sessions of EBU, I've had somebody go from 250 to 40. So almost back into normal range. And she's still in that process. So hopefully we get her there.
And listen, again, the whole idea is if there's active cancer, and this is one of the markers that we use determining low oxygen states, right? To change that terrain, to change that environment, you go aggressive on things like EBU to be able to kind of make it less conducive for cancer growth. Right. And make it function as optimally as possible. So that's the other part that people ask me, well, how many sessions? Typically, a session a week for about 3 weeks is a good start.
Right.
To just get that oxygen, that oxidative stress that we talked about in a positive way going, and start to clean up some things, right? There could be more. And again, strategically, if we're using it to clear up Epstein-Barr, we might use it for a different way.
I mean,
right?
I've had patients that have said, hey, I didn't notice the first 2 EBU sessions very much. What am I be expected after the third one? I mean, I've had people come back, hey, after that third one, I've noticed a huge difference in just how I feel overall.
Right.
And how I'm sleeping, to how my energy levels. I mean, so it's kind of funny because I've had very, interesting things happen to me where I've had patients come up to me and go, I didn't notice it the first time, but I noticed it the second time. I noticed it the third time, or fourth time, or fifth time, and it seems like there's something that happens around the third EBU, where I've had people report back and saying, "Hey, I definitely notice how good I feel after this."
Well, listen. At the end of the day, if you're getting oxygen into that cell, the mitochondria. Right, which they'll
catch up. It takes time, and they catch up and they start working at it,
Because we have a lot of this, a lot of junk, right?
Yeah.
Again, toxins, chemicals, infections in our system, poor gut health, whatever it might be. The mitochondria, which produces energy, there's a term in the literature now. It's called a mitochondrial defect, right? The mitochondrial defect is not primary; it's secondary. And it's secondary usually to the easiest way I liken it to is if I had the flu, right? I'm going to be really sore and really achy because of the inflammation that's developed,
right?
And I'm going to be super tired because that infection is causing a mitochondrial defect. It's causing a defect in the ability of the mitochondria to spit out energy, and so no different than the flu. If you have these toxins and chemicals and overload of Epstein-Barr per se, or bacteria, whatever it might be, parasites, candida, that is going to affect the mitochondria and the way it spits out energy. So if you add oxygen, immediately,
total support, and it stays with you over time because of the way we're saturating the blood.
You're saturating, you're cleaning up, you're trying to get rid of the load. And that's why I think it worked so well for me. It's because I had this load, it cleaned up the load, and all of a sudden, right away, the mitochondria were able to work the way they're supposed to work.
And you rested. Rest is another thing. Sleep is probably very underutilized, and with disease, people talk about, once I started sleeping bad, I noticed that this is when this started happening to me. So getting good sleep, I think, is a very, very, very big contributor to
just overall
good health.
No, a mainstay. If you're not getting good sleep, you're not able to stay asleep or get to sleep or stay asleep, or you wake up tired or you fatigue in the afternoon. There's for sure
countless studies done with sleep and how it is essential for our health and getting good sleep. So.
All right, I think we're good, man. I think that was a good session.
Okay.
We're gonna wrap it up, gang. So
there's a couple of questions
I'll give you,
if you wanted to touch on.
Let's see.
Looks like still.
I think we got anonymous. What are you measuring at the oligo scan to determine someone is experiencing oxidative stress? Well, we're looking at the vitamins, the minerals, and we're looking at the heavy metal content in the oligo scan, right? But also, they list as far as the different physiological areas that are affected they're measuring it based on your deficits. So that's kind of the gist of it. If I have low trace minerals, I have low B6, B9, B12, you're going to have oxidative stress at the cellular level.
Yeah.
So we're able to kind of cumulatively look at that. And then at the bottom of the oligo scan, it lists, if acidosis. It lists your intoxication of metals. It'll list how your physiology overall is doing.
Right.
And we can collectively kind of get an idea if there's a lot of oxidative stress in there. So you're kind of looking at everything and then the bottom of that test as well. So, okay. So, all right, gang. So if from a standpoint of healing or cancer, right? If you know somebody or you have somebody that needs some help, the 949-581-4673 or HOPE number is the one to call. Vicky does a really good job of processing patients. You have the Perfectly Healthy store, like the ketone water is the only thing we really talked about, 866-606 or 616-7474. And then from the wellness side, right, OligoScan, wellness, things like that, the things that I talked about or we talked about, 949-680-1880, and Miles will get you set up for that.
For scheduling and
for
stuff
scheduling.
like that.
Absolutely. So anyway, listen, thank you so much for being here. I say it every week, every time we're on, that the fact that we're trying to create this movement, we're trying to educate and inform, and you're here learning. We hear it every day. So
Yeah.
when we see patients, whether it's the healing patients or the center side patients, when I do the oligo scan or see them for a follow-up, they always talk about the cancer conversation. And you're also appreciative of the information. And honestly, the information's critical because everybody should be getting this in the conventional side.
Yeah,
when they have a
yeah.
chronic disease, all these different things we talked about in the pillars should be the mainstream. It should be the mainstay, right? We understand it's not. We understand the reasons it's not. So it's our job to facilitate this movement through education and information. And you're there receiving it. Now you can go and share it, which is awesome. Regardless if they come to the clinic or not, you can share the information so they have the ability to heal with the highest upside. And that's the movement.
And word of mouth travels.
Absolutely. So, Tanner, thanks for being here, man.
Yeah, of
awesome,
course.
bro.
Of course. Thanks for having me, Dr. Roney.
Listen, we're some of the only males downstairs, so we stick together.
That's right.
We get beat up a little bit, so
Yeah.
we're boys.
We've been tight for a while now.
Absolutely. So, all right, everybody. Thanks again. Have
Thank
a great
you, guys.
couple weeks, and we'll see you soon. Much love, everybody. Be good.